All right, hello, data wranglers. In this module, we are going to discuss really the very first stage of the data processing cycle, which is importing data into R. And we'll be using the tidyverse like we've been focusing our attention in the last couple modules. And in this module, for the import, we'll be using a package called Reader. But I want to just take a moment and talk about like what is data wrangling in general. And so the last couple of modules, we've been focusing on various aspects of this process. So data wrangling is really the process of taking data, importing it into some sort of software, assuming that the data set is large and you don't want to do things by hand. And so that import process can be tricky in itself. And then once you import that data into your software, into R, for example, it is very likely not going to be tidy. So the very first stage after the import process would be to tidy up your data so that each row is an observation, each column is a variable, each cell in the table is an individual value. And once we have tidy data, then we can start to transform and manipulate the data. And we were using the dplyr package in the tidyverse to do a lot of those transformations. And then you can get into the kind of exploratory data analysis cycle, which is this cycle which is in the middle, where you would create some visualizations to explore the data. For example, using ggplot2 is a nice package for visualizing data that we've played around with. Based on the visuals that you get, that might inform the type of statistical questions you're interested in exploring. That's going to affect the type of models that you build. That might affect further transformations in the variables. And you go through this cycle of exploring the data, doing your analysis, and then in the end, you want to take that analysis and communicate it most likely to a much more broad and general audience. So you want to take those results and be able to communicate them in non-technical terms to more lay people that aren't necessarily statisticians. So that's kind of the full process of data analysis. Data wrangling is really that initial stage of importing data, wrangling it into a tidy form, doing some transformations on that data to put it into a format where we're able to go ahead and start to explore it with visualizations and modeling and other tools that you are likely learned or will learn in some other courses. So that's what we mean by data wrangling. And this process of data wrangling is going to require us, first of all, to be comfortable with writing code, as we've been focusing on, because when we're working with large data sets, we're going to want to automate this process. It's going to require us to work with different forms of data, such as strings and categorical variables, logical variables, dates that we haven't seen just yet, possibly spatial data and other things. Data wrangling requires a strong knowledge of the different structures that hold our data sets. So, for example, whether our data is being stored in a data frame or a tibble or a vector or a list or a matrix. So being comfortable with all of these different structures that we've been discussing and minimizing duplication and writing very simple readable code. That is really a huge part of this learning process. So we don't, I mean, at first you want to get code that works, and then you want to start to focus on how can I make that code run more efficiently, and don't underestimate that when you scale that up to work with very large data sets. That's really important. When you're sharing that code with other people, that's really important. So that's a little introduction to the data wrangling process in general. And in the module that we're going to work on in this notebook, which is linked in the description of this video, So if you want to open up this module and follow along in the rest of the videos, that's the point here. What we're going to focus on is the import stage, the very initial stage. We kind of have been working our way backwards through Wrangling. The transform stage, we used dplyr. That was a couple of modules ago. The previous module, we did the tidying process with tidyr, and today we're going to focus on the import step. Okay, thanks everybody.